Hi, welcome back to Mr. Slover's Math. Today we're going to focus on figuring out how much you get paid per day or how much you get paid per week. So the first part of the notes is focusing on just one day, because once we've mastered one day, then we can figure out how much we make in a week. Now, some of this may be extra. Like you may not need to write out how many hours you're at work, how many hours you don't get paid, how many hours you worked, what's your pay rate. You may not need all of those. That's just me trying to guide you to get the correct answer, the steps that you need in order to be successful. So our example says you clocked in at 7 a.m. and you clocked out at 3 p.m. You make $14.25 an hour and had a 30-minute unpaid lunch break. How much money did you earn today? So you were at work. This is why we did elapsed time the other lesson. You were at work from 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. That means you were at work for 8.5 hours. 30 minutes was your unpaid lunch break, so you do not get paid for that amount of time. So hours not paid is 0.5. So I did my lunch was 30 minutes, I divided by 60, and I got 0.5. The reason I'm choosing to work with decimals is I don't want there to be confusion between hours and minutes and hours. So we're going to try and focus everything just on hours. So we're going to have some decimals. We're going to be converting minutes into hours. So we're going to do 8.5 minus 0.5 because 8 hours, 30 minutes is 8.5 hours. And we subtract them because we did not get paid for that lunch break. So we got paid 8 hours of work. Our pay rate is $14.25 an hour. So the money earned, just like I listed here, is the paid working hours times your pay rate. So $14.25 times 8 hours. I made $114 that day. Next one, same exam, same concept. You don't have to list all of this stuff out. That is me trying to help you get the answer. Some of you can read this, be like, oh, okay, I already know how many hours I was at work, subtract it. So really, right away, I know I'm at 7.5 hours. That's fine. Okay? I'm just trying to help you get that. So my elapsed time from clocking in at 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. is 8 hours. I have a 30-minute unpaid lunch break. So I'm going to subtract half an hour, 0.5 hours. So 8 minus 0.5 was the 7 hour and 30 minutes, or the 7.5 hours. So to figure out how much I get paid, I take my pay rate, which I tell you in the problem, and I multiply by how many hours I worked. So today I made $103.13. Similar for letter B, and letter C is similar, but there's just one catch. So I figure out how long I work. I was at work for 7.5 hours. I'm subtracting half an hour unpaid lunch break. So I get paid for 7 hours of work. Now my rate is $4.23. Maybe thinking, Mr. Sober, that's not right. It's a typo. Nope. So this particular example is for a server, someone who serves at a restaurant. Okay? They have a low hourly wage, which is why this example talks about tips. That's where they make their money. So I'm going to take my pay rate, which is $4.23 an hour, and I multiply by 7 hours because that's how many hours that I was working that day. I get $29.61. Once again, that doesn't sound like a lot. That's because I did not add in my tips. When you add in your tips, you are literally adding that to what you just came up with. Anytime it says commission, anytime it says tips, you are adding that to whatever you already have for that day. So I'm adding $62.50. I get $92.11 for that day. Letter D, E, and F are all very similar. Trying to figure out how much you get paid. You just have to make sure that you read it correctly. 45 minutes, I will caution you on letter E, is 0.75. So maybe instead of a 30-minute lunch break, you took 45 minutes because you had to go run an errand, you had to get some gas, you forgot your food, you had to go home to get it. So that's why it was longer than 30 minutes. All right, so that was how to figure out how much you get paid in one day. Now we're going to figure out how much you get paid in 1 week. We're going to kind of do the same thing we just did, figure out how many hours we work per day. But then we're going to figure out how many hours we work per week once we figure out how many we worked that day. So we clocked in at 7 and clocked out at 7 right away. I know 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is 12 hours. I have a 30-minute unpaid lunch break, so I'm going to subtract that 0.5. So I worked 11.5 hours that day. And it said I worked those hours Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Well, that's 3 days. So this 11.5 is how many hours I worked. This 3 is how many days I worked those hours. It gives me a total of 34 hours and 30 minutes. That's how many hours I worked that week. Here's my pay rate. I got that just from reading the problem. It said you get paid $19.75 an hour. So I take the hours worked times my pay rate. And this particular week, I made $681.38. Letter B, I clocked in at 8 a.m., clocked out at 4:30 p.m., $15 an hour, and I had a 30-minute unpaid lunch break. So that means I worked a total of 8 hours. I worked Monday through Friday. It doesn't say Monday and Friday. It says Monday through Friday. So that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That is 5 days. So I'm taking how many hours I worked times 5. Gives me 40 hours is what I worked that week. And I get $15 an hour. So I did 40 times 15, and I made $600 that week. Now, letter C is probably the most complicated one, or one of the most complicated ones you're going to see, because now we're getting into overtime. So overtime, remember, is anything that's over 40 hours of work in that week. So I clocked in at 1 a.m., I clocked out at 1 p.m., so right away I know that's a 12-hour shift, and I had a 30-minute unpaid lunch break. My regular rate is $20 an hour, and anything over 40 hours is time and a half. I worked these hours Monday through Thursday. So I worked 11.5 hours each day. Monday through Thursday is 4 days. So 11 and a half times 4 is 46 hours for that week. Well, if I go back and read it, it says anything over 40 hours is time and a half. Well, I worked over 40 hours. Okay. And actually, I worked 6 hours of overtime. I did 46 minus 40. That's how many hours of overtime I had, was 6 hours. My overtime rate says time and a half. And we've seen this several times. Time and a half is 1.5 times whatever your salary is. In this case, it's $20. So my overtime rate is $30 an hour. So I've got two separate parts here. This top part is my regular pay. 40 hours times $20 an hour gave me $800. But I worked 6 hours of overtime at $30 an hour for an additional $180. So now I'm going to add these two together. The $800 is how much I got paid for the week. And then on top of that, I had some overtime that week in the form of $180. So I'm going to add those two together. And this week, I made $980. Just as a general rule, if you are working something that has a job that has hourly and you get overtime, you should be keeping track of your hours. Your company may not necessarily calculate your overtime correctly. So it's on you to make sure that they're doing and paying you what they should be. Letter D. So now, what if I don't work the same thing all week long? So I clocked in at 3:30, clocked out at 9. Maybe I'm a student and I can only work 3:30 to 9 during the week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, those are my hours. But on Saturday, when there is no school, I work from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. An hour unpaid lunch break that day. So Monday through Wednesday, I worked 5.5 hours, and I worked that shift for 3 days. So that gave me 16.5 hours. But I also worked on Saturday, and Saturday I worked for 8 hours. So that week, I'm going to add the 16.5 and the 8. I'm going to add those together, and I end up getting 24.5 hours. So then I multiply that by my pay rate, and I get $361.38. So letter C is a very straightforward example. Letter F is another overtime example, so please try that one on your own. Hit pause on the video and come back and check it out to see if you got the right answer. So if you have questions, make sure you let me know. You do not have to fill all of these blanks in.